This is The Cross Section with Nate Lull and David Edelstein.
Featuring special guest, Crystal Bass.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's another week of The Cross Section, and believe it or not, I was thinking about this. It's week 15, which it kind of feels like the time has gone very fast during all of this, at the same time as it feels like everything has kind of gone pretty slow. It's a very interesting paradigm where we're here kind of taking everything one day at a time, and things just feel like they're changing on an hourly basis, really, and literally they are in many cases, to the point where so much is happening in such a short time that it feels like there is so much time passing. But at the same time, it's like, here we are, it's the end of July. Wasn't it just the end of March, April? Maybe it feels like it was just May or June. So here we are, week 15. Nate right now is not in the studio. I'm in the studio here today. Nate is actually at a baseball game, which of course youth sports have been able to come back. Baseball, one of the ones that the governor's office has deemed a moderate risk sport. And so baseball and softball had resumed on July 6th, which was their eligible start date. So Nate is out there. He'll be giving us some questions and reports from his game later on in the show. But why don't we just jump into it in this week of changes. Hockey's been getting closer. Major League Baseball has finally resumed. I've been talking with a lot of different sectional leaders and coaches about what kind of messages and lessons they can learn from the professional sports that are resuming. The NBA scrimmages also, by the way. What can they learn from that and maybe bring to the high school level? And while they say it's very different, obviously funding and having money to figure things out and testing and the large scale that they're at is very different. One thing they've said is that those sports coming back are the example for how people can continue with social distancing, physical distancing guidelines, wearing a mask, hand sanitizing, doing what needs to be done, and everyone buying into that collectively, following the guidelines to make sure that we can get back to sports and we can get back to all of these things that we want. And so that's the lesson that I've been told is coming out of those professional sports as they resume. But today we want to take a special episode to focus on high school sports, as we do often and always here on the Cross Section. But today, a perspective of winter sports. You look back to March, and when the pandemic started, and on March 12th and March 11th, and everything kind of shut down, really literally did, it was the championship season for winter sports, ice hockey, basketball, and now they've kind of been on the sidelines as spring sports were completely affected with a canceled season over time. And then now fall sports have been delayed by a month. And so now we're at a moment where winter sports are not really in the conversation, but we'd like to bring them into the conversation. What exactly are winter sport coaches and even athletes thinking right now as they see everything around them changing? What have they been reacting? What are their thoughts? And how do you prepare if you do get to a point where January comes around as the first time sports resume, if that happens, and sports aren't played in 2020 the rest of the year? Winter sports are scheduled to be the first thing back. So today we have a special guest, Utica Proctor head coach, girls basketball varsity head coach, Crystal Bass, is going to be joining us to give us some insight on all of that and what it looks like from the perspective of a winter sport coach who they've kind of had the most time in all of this to process what's going on, because it was at the very end of their season where it kind of went down and the pandemic started and everything changed, meaning really on their timeline, if everything stayed the same, they are just waiting the same amount of time before winter sports do come back, before they're expected to start at a normal time. They would be used to their season having ended when it did, and in some cases got cut off before that full year comes back around. So here we are, end of July, but hopefully no snow will start. We never know here in central New York or the Mohawk Valley whether it will start snowing on any given day. But let's talk about winter a little bit. So let's welcome in Crystal Bass, the head girls varsity basketball coach of Proctor High School. So usually we have Nate Lull with us, who is the sports director at WCDO Radio down in Sydney, New York. But he is currently actually live, so we're going to have him kind of join in live in a way. But he's at a baseball game right now because sports have come back to the area.
Good for him.
So for me here in studio, but it is good to have you on, and thank you for jumping on. So I guess we could jump into it.
Okay.
First, would you be able to just kind of give an explanation of who you are and how you got involved with Proctor girls basketball and your experience with the program?
Yes, I am Crystal Bass. I work for the district. I'm a social worker for Utica City School District. When I started working for the district, I was actually an assistant coach at MBCC for the women's program. And then after a while, they kept kind of asking me if I had an interest to coach their JV program, the girls JV at Proctor. And, I was looking for something different. It's kind of going a different way, going from college back to the high school, into the high school. But I thought I would, had an interest in it, and I was willing to do it at the time. The timing was right. And so I got started in their girls JV program.
And so this year was your first year as the varsity head coach for Proctor girls basketball.
Correct.
So
yes.
You were one of the first coaches I'd spoken with in the winter sports season. And I remember the whole idea was, we were like, the team is going to improve this year. We're going to do better. And I saw and heard the way that you kind of led your team, not even just talking about the results of the games, but how do you think everything kind of played out this year for your team?
I think we did well because it was a year we were looking to change the culture of the program. And I knew we were going to take our hits, maybe not as much as I thought we actually did, but with that aside, with the wins, not focusing on the wins or the losses, I believe that we did well. It's really trying to make that shift to get the girls to buy into what we're looking to do, the type of player that we were looking to have on the team. And I think that started to happen. So that was really nice to see. And I think the girls were really starting to buy into that, focusing on their academics first and then being a good teammate. So I think we really started to see improvements in that area.
I know that you had a few seniors who were stepping up into that kind of leadership role to help lead this year, both on the court and off the court. Obviously, the team didn't make it to sectionals, so it almost fortunately in a way compared it to some other teams. The season didn't get cut off for because the pandemic had started at the end of the season. But how do you think that these seniors reacted this year when everything did kind of play out, and were they in any way almost happy that they weren't in a situation where it got cut off just because they got a chance to play their full final season?
To be honest with you, I'm not sure if they really thought that far ahead with it. I think they were appreciative that they did get to finish a full season, had some closure, to their season and could kind of celebrate that in a sense, that their senior year was over and they could say it was complete and not always wondering what if kind of situation. So I'm not sure if all of them, the seniors really thought that far ahead, but I do believe that they celebrated the fact that they could, had a full season that was complete.
From your perspective as head coach now heading into your second year this year, hopefully, when everything works out, what kind of legacy do you think that these seniors left for the future of the program, as you said that it was a rebuilding year?
I think probably really kind of grasping the fact that you have to change. They had to learn to change. Obviously, different coaching style, and they had to learn to adapt to that. And I think that's what they're going to try actually leave is the fact that you have to adapt. Things aren't always going to go your way. Like right now, we're looking to see if there's actually going to be a season, but adapting to whatever comes your way. And I think that's what they did best, in this 1 year that we had, is learning that, okay, I have to really change. If I want to be a part of this program, I have to adapt to what I'm being taught and the changes that the coaching staff is trying to make.
What's been your perspective as everything has changed starting back in March? It was the end of like the winter sports seasons, the championships that had gotten cut off, spring sports then got moved, and now here we are with a delayed fall season. First of all, what's your perspective been as you've kind of watched? Because I feel like winter sports have for the most part been out of the picture. It's been just kind of a sideline.
Right. I think because there's so much uncertainty regarding all that's going on, they're just going, day by day. They're really not projecting in the future. So it's like, okay, let's just look at fall sports. We can't even begin to think about winter sports because we don't know what's going on. I think because of all the uncertainty, obviously this is so new. That's why they call it a novel virus. And so I think that's been the hard part, because obviously the ones of us who coach those winter sports, that's all we're thinking about, is that sport, whether it's going to happen or not. And I think it's difficult for all athletes. If you've played a sport a long time, it becomes part of your identity, and then the thought of having that sport maybe not take place, especially as seniors, that's a tough one. That's a really difficult one for those student athletes to kind of wrap their heads around, that may be a possibility that year is not going to happen for them.
I know one question that Nate wanted to ask you from afar at the moment is how much communication have you had with your team and your student athletes during all of this? I know teams practice all year, but as things have been changing and there haven't been practices, what kind of communication have you had with them? And if you have, what have you said to them?
I haven't had a ton. I'm usually like to give players a break. I believe in, players just need a break after, because basketball is a long season. You're just dealing with them, listening to your coach get on you, or, constantly tired. So I really believe your players need a break from coaches. I think it's healthy for them, and I think it's healthy for the coaching staff. So I've communicated with a few, right now they're bored because they're used to doing things. If they're not playing, working on their skill, a lot of them play AAU. So I think that's been difficult for them. So some have sent me video. I had a parent send me a video of, because I have two of their students, two of his children that play on the team, and one plays for the boys program, and, training, they're running up this hill, they're like, training's begun, so they're keeping up, showing that they are still trying to, work out and do some things. So this is a difficult time, I think, for a lot of our athletes.
Yeah, I was going to say, I was doing a lot of features on athletes early on when this had all started. And one thing that I was focusing on was how do you stay active during all of this? And I've run into a bunch actually on the streets as I've been moving around, and they've been like jogging, or I've gotten videos sent to me of them, making makeshift weights out of cinder blocks and things like that.
Right.
It does seem that they're continuing to stay active. And I imagine as a coach of the team, that makes you probably feel pretty good that obviously they have this even at a crazy time to keep driving.
Exactly, it does. It really, to see them still put in the effort, put in the time, even with all the uncertainty, they're still willing. They have that hope, and that's the wonderful thing about, young children, adolescents, is just that they have that hope that, okay, no, everything's going to be fine, we're going to get back to where we were, because I want to continue to do what I love doing, and that's playing whatever sport it is that they have an interest in.
So for those who are watching that might have forgotten some of the details of the recent New York State Public High School Athletic Association announcement, what was decided last week was that fall sports would be delayed until a start of September 21st from their original August 24th, so about a month. And Rob Zayas, the executive director, said that that month is supposed to help schools kind of figure things out before they need to also think about sports. But interestingly enough, in that same announcement, what was also announced was that, hey, here's our plan. September 21st is our date. But if things don't work out for 2020 at all, starting January 2021, here's our plan of 10-week sports seasons, and starting with winter, then fall, then spring, and they kind of overlap 2 weeks. And that has a lot of moving parts, and we're not, like you said, one day at a time is what I've been hearing from everyone.
Exactly.
But in that case, that would put winter sports as the next sport to be played. So your basketball team, that's if this fall sports for 2020 doesn't work out, which currently it's in the process for September 21. But the second half of that plan would show that winter sports would be next. So what kind of thought processes do you need to start having almost to prepare to think that you might be, as a basketball coach, the first sport or one of the first sports to come back if that January plan is the one that winds up happening?
Yeah, that's a difficult, question to answer. It's first of all, I have to let you know, we technically have not been named as the coaches. So that's another process that has to happen. But with that, trying to prepare, like with all the unknowns, not knowing if school's even going to open safely. And that's obviously the key word is that safety issue. Can we open our schools and then participate in sports in a safe way? Obviously the safety of our student athletes, the coaches, and that's the part that's difficult for anyone to pin down, to really look at. But so I think it's going to be one of those things, once they make that decision, everyone's going to be running around, okay, now how do we get up and running? How do we get this season going? How do we prepare our students, our athletes for this season?
Yeah, you mentioned that you also work for the district. So have you had any other kind of perspective too, besides the sports perspective, just on what it takes to make that decision? Because I know I've spoken with Rob Zayas about, I know I ask him a bunch of questions, but I also respect the fact that the answer is often going to be, we need the guidance first, then we need the guidance from this other one, then we need the state guidance, then we need to know what schools are doing, then we need to know how athletics plays in schools. So there's this whole decision tree. So do you have perspective also on that kind of decision side of things besides the athletics?
Not a whole lot. I keep asking myself because we just don't know. I know they were supposed to submit, each district by this month had to submit something to the state to see what their plans would be, what they would do to try to open safely if there was going to be in-person education. And I think maybe next week or the week after, they're supposed to put that up. We're supposed to have all that information, what the district is looking to do to try to reopen, what the plan will be, whether it's all in-person or hybrid of in-person and remote learning. So, no one really knows yet at this point. I'm just waiting to see that information come out. And I think it's supposed to come out and maybe be on the website, school website by sometime early either August or the, second week in August.
Yeah. So you mentioned
we're close. I mean, time is flying.
Yeah. So here we are at the end of July and we're already trying to talk about it in a way.
Exactly.
Even tomorrow seems so far away at this point.
You're right, it does.
But you mentioned the July 31st deadline for when every school district in the New York State has been asked to submit a kind of proposal for what they think reopening would look like.
Right.
Proctor is the largest school in our area, and I've mentioned on the cross-section before the media market makeup. So for me, covering sports for the television station, I'm covering the east side of Oneida County, all of Herkimer County, and all of Otsego County. So that's kind of my range. And even beyond that, Proctor is the biggest school in the area. Do you have any insight on whether in the proposal Proctor has put together, how sports and athletics are included in their proposal to the state of how that can come back, or have they kind of just focused on only the academic side? Do you know?
Yeah, I have no information. I've been asking. I asked a few people. I asked some of the principals that work at Proctor to see if I can get some inside information, and I usually always get it's like we just don't know at this point. So it seems like it's kind of this top secret thing that's going to happen. That basically the majority of us are going to find out at the same time what the plans are.
I've almost been thinking that we're all becoming investigative journalists, that I'm not alone. Because everyone.
You're absolutely right.
I mean, there's people are usually active on Twitter and online and social media, interacting with me and others about the sports and the games and the scores and the standings and the excitement. But I've got to say, during all of this, people have asked me more questions than I might have even asked other people. Or so.
Right.
But as you kind of look at this, and even in all the confusion, do you have any kind of gut feeling about what might wind up playing out for this year's fall and even into the winter sports seasons?
I don't. I mean, before they came out with that possibly pushing it to January, that's what I was thinking a while ago. If they could not get those fall sports in, and if we definitely weren't going to, open our season in that typical time of November, I thought we would be looking at January. That would be like the next step is possibly be able to go to January. But we just don't know until, they get this virus under control. And right now it's just kind of out of control across this country. And once we, until we get that and people start to relax and feel like, okay, we either have a vaccine and we have the treatment protocols that are going to help people if they do contract the virus, I think then they're going to really start to solidify their plans for what we can do safely. Because that's obviously, like I said before, that's the key, it's that safety issue. But everything's going to be experiment. Whatever they decide to do, we're going to be experimenting. And whether it works or not, that, like they say, that canary in the coal mine kind of thing. Oh, it's okay. Nope, that probably wasn't the best decision. What do we have next? What's plan B?
Yeah, going through communication school and now also working professionally in the business, one thing I've always been told and have experienced, to the massive effect now, is that sports reporting is not just about the game. It's not just about the final score and the stats. Those are important, and they're important to put in context of how the team's doing to help tell the other stories about the players on the team and how they're coming together and the life lessons that are involved. But there's also, you can't cover sports without understanding economics or understanding human nature, exercise science, or in this case, health and safety and group,
exactly.
And so it's really being emphasized to that point here. And it's just, there's so much interrelatedness between everything that's going on that it really does always seem to come back to that answer of, here's our best plan right now based on the guidance we've gotten from the state, which is the government, then from the health department and from the education department and the CDC, and trying to find the best way to mitigate the risk and put it all together. When I think about basketball, I know that they've categorized that as I believe it's a medium risk sport, or was it a high risk sport? But either way, it was one of the higher two levels.
Yeah, I would consider it high.
Because the players are right on top of each other, blocking on the court.
Yeah.
So, I don't have the answer, and I'm not going to try and ask about, what will that look like in January, because we don't know where the country will be, because, again, it relies on it. But I do imagine there will be safety precautions still in place by January, even if we go to that plan B.
Right.
From your experience in the game, what kind of things are possible to even be implemented to still keep the game as something that can happen with social distancing in place? What safety measures are needed?
I don't think, how do you really do that realistically? You look at sports like tennis, much easier to do. You got someone across you, got a net, and they're across from each other. But sports, like basketball, like you said earlier, you're right up on top of each other. You're guarding someone, you're blocking someone. And so you're just that, you can't do social distancing and play that sport, the way it's been played. Unless you want to go back years ago, I think when my mom said she played, they only half could go over, defense played on one end and then offense played on the other side, not all 10 people around the the team are on the same side at once. So I guess they built in a little social distancing years ago. But obviously that's not the game of basketball any longer. So I just don't know, how do you do that? How do you have, I mean, you could take the precautions of, hand sanitizer, using that, people, but still, it's just, I think, playing the sport. People are, you're breathing heavy because you're running up and down the court, and how do you social distance when you're playing basketball? Yeah, we would love it. We get all kinds of open threes and tell them they have to stay back and let us shoot.
Yeah. It's a very different kind of game. Maybe,
exactly. Like playing horse.
Yeah. Stay that way even after everything's okay. Like, yeah, stay 6 feet away from me on the court.
Exactly.
But
Exactly.
I mean, we've also had discussions about, sharing the basketball, even to that point of how the virus might be on the basketball, and then
right.
Like, what are you gonna do every time you pass it, or every time you change it between teams? You need to switch the ball, or you need to wipe it down. With the pace of basketball, that
right, it's impossible.
And not to give, I'm an optimist, so I like to think there are ways to do things and do them safely. I'm not the one who is educated in what those decisions would be or how to make them. I'm not making the decisions, but I like to think that there's a possibility rather than just, being negative here and saying, it's definitely not going to happen. But
right.
It all depends, right, on the state of the virus in the country and the state and everything. Do you think that schedules? One thing I've heard about too is the executive director for Section 3, John Rathbun, and also Section 4, which I cover, Ben Nelson, have both said that it's going to really rely on the leagues this year for all sports to work together in ways they haven't, to maybe not have the typical conferences playing, but to find the geographically close teams to play regardless of what class they're in. Is that something that you could see playing out well, and what kind of effect might that have on how a season gets played? Or I know it's the lowest priority, but even sectional play down the line.
Right. Obviously it's going to have an impact, and I can understand probably them trying to cut down on that traveling, teams going out to different areas, traveling and then coming back, and trying to minimize some of that sense of that safety issue of where you're having contact. I mean, because that's what we're looking at, is some areas have the virus under control a little better, some areas don't, and trying to minimize that traveling. But I think it will have an impact if you're playing, for schools that are smaller schools that are playing larger schools. That's not going to be fun for them all the time, or it could give them that workout that they would like, gives them a chance to kind of play up. If it's a team that they're going against that is better, because it doesn't necessarily mean just because you're a larger school that you're good. And we ran into that, obviously. But it does set you up for that sectionals playing, like if you're playing AA and you've been playing down smaller schools, and kind of get used to that style of play, and that, with the smaller schools are playing. Then when you hit sectionals, when there's a different style of play, obviously that's going to have a negative impact on you trying to, one, make it to sectionals, and then once you get to sectionals, trying to move forward within sectionals. So it's going to have all kinds of implications that happens. But, I think most of all, people just want to get back to playing. They don't really care, we'll figure that out if that's one of the options, as long as we can get back on the court, that's the important thing.
Yeah, and we see that with baseball right now, major league level, and even on the local level, that people are just happy to be back playing, and
exactly.
Something to do just to have their season, because all of a sudden it looks like multiple seasons now are in question.
Yes.
And just the spring, rather than just went from end of winter to all of spring to some of fall now.
Right.
So there are definitely just getting back on the court would be a huge step forward.
Absolutely.
I've heard that, obviously for fall, the state championships have been canceled. And of course, if the January scenario played out with 3 sports overlapping, I imagine that there wouldn't be state championships or maybe even sectionals, just due to the nature of around. But that's the lower priority. Winning a championship is the lower priority. Then
absolutely.
If you were able to meet with your team during this fall or at any point, because that was deemed safe, would you be thinking that you would, and of course, like you said, we got to figure out the coaches, again, which is a big part of it, because some schools I've heard don't even have fall sport coaches yet. So
Right.
it would take them time to know that there are going to be fall sports for sure before they even hire coaches and train them. So
Right.
the process in itself. But given that you'll be back as the head coach of the team again this year, would you be thinking about hosting scrimmages with your own team or practices in any kind, if that were allowed?
I think so, yes, if it was allowed, and obviously I always go back to safety, and they said it's safe and we can do it in a safe manner. It may start up, we do it small, we bring in small groups, you work with a small number of players, and just get them back into that rhythm of being on the court, working on their skills. So absolutely, it would be something, because I think, we definitely need it. I think it's definitely because they, lost their summer as far as that competition. But yeah, it would definitely be something that I would, look to do, and maybe having to adapt it if it wasn't all the players, or a number of people, just, maybe reducing the numbers.
What do you think is the biggest thing that needs to happen? I already am, as I'm saying this, I'm calculating my own answers to this based on what I've heard from everyone, and kind of I can imagine what you might say or what some people might say or have said to me. But what do you think is the biggest thing that really needs to happen in order for some form of athletics to come back during this 2020-2021 school year?
And I go back to, that control of the virus. I think if we all do our part, they've given us kind of guidelines that they so far at this point have seen that have worked, to kind of reduce that virus load that's out there within the community. And so I think if we do that collectively, and it is a sacrifice, and we did it before, and we were shut up at home. So it's the sacrifice that we all have to make. And if not only just sports, it's just people getting back to their normal lives. So if we're willing to make that sacrifice, and it is tough, I'm not going to say it's an easy thing, but willing to do that, then we can start to reduce that virus that's circulating within the community, and then get ourselves back, on either the field or the court, back to these sports. Because like I said earlier, it becomes a part of your identity as an athlete, playing that sport. So I think mentally, just for the emotional well-being too, it's important. That's why they want to get kids back to school, for that emotional piece, being able to socialize again. And sports also is a part of that. It becomes, you invest so much time into trying to develop your skills and your craft, being the sport, so it does become part of your identity. So it's important. People have gotten depressed if they couldn't play that sport. You see with athletes who get injured for a long period of time, and and it's a detriment to their emotional well-being. So I think that's the thing, trying to get these athletes back into their sports. But it's going to take, like I said, that sacrifice of getting this virus under control, so people feel like, okay, it's safe, because you got parents that are going to make the decision, even the state saying and government saying, oh, you're fine. Parents are going to obviously be worrying about their children, and they're not sure. They may make the decision, no, I don't feel safe right now, and they may not either allow them back in school or to play that sport. So people have to feel.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, people have to feel confident and comfortable again, and that, regain that sense of security.
Yeah, there's almost a chance then, you're saying, that even if sports do come back, athletics do return, interscholastic athletics, which is the one remaining part that we're talking about, that it really then would be an extra step on top of that. It's not a guarantee that every family or every student athlete will say, yes, this is something I want to do, or I feel comfortable. Which obviously, if you can't get 5 players on a team, and some of the small schools, I mean, maybe Proctor doesn't have that problem as a AA school, but maybe some smaller schools only have 7 players. I've seen soccer teams this year that literally had 11 players on their team, and they were just always playing. So it's not out of the question that could be an issue. Maybe we And I don't know, this is the first time I'm thinking about this, but I know we have some combined school districts nearby. So like what,
Right.
soccer, Westmoreland to Oriskany,
Hmm.
together. So I don't know whether schools, what thoughts would be, maybe you have thought off the bat here, but of if smaller schools came to a point where they, or even Proctor, if it came to it,
Exactly.
have enough, is it even something that's safe, for combining school districts together? Because isn't that the whole thing? We want to keep everything separate.
Right.
Would you want,
Exactly.
would the section, would it be willing, would the guidance allow for nearby school districts to combine for this year, to make a full team even?
Right. Yeah, there's so many variables, that you're looking at. But I guess, if they were looking to allow them to play each other, why wouldn't they allow them like to combine if it came down there to try to field the team, to make, have that combination of a couple of schools. And so it's tough. There's so many things we're looking at, so many different factors that come into play, talking about the parents' decision, obviously with pro sports, they're adults, they're making that decision, they're looking at their contracts and trying to decide what's best for themselves and their health. But we have parents, we may say, oh no, everything's fine, but now you have that parent making that decision for their child whether or not they will be involved in that sport.
Yeah,
And that's what's difficult.
I almost imagine, obviously all of this is with the overarching umbrella of safety is first. I wonder if there will ever be a moment where, if, we got to get to the point first, but if sports come back, and a student wants to play, but the parents don't want them to play or something like that, that could be actually a very interesting moment for some of the athletes, because we always talk about they only have the 4 years they're in high school.
Exactly.
It's not like something for me where I'm like, okay, I'm a broadcaster. Maybe I'll be around broadcasting sports for many more years. Or coaches that I've heard, and even the executive directors have told me, they've said, hey, for us, we're going to be administrators for a long time. We'll be here longer than 4 years. But these student athletes, 1 year, one season, that's 25%.
Right.
So
it's huge.
Yeah,
it's that window of opportunity. It's all about that window of opportunity whenever you're doing anything. And there's, when you close, like you said, you close one window, that 25% from that is huge for, because there's maybe some athletes, that's it. They're not going to go on to play college sports, but so they just want to be able to embrace their high school athletics, and, losing a year, that's big for them.
And so you mentioned controlling the virus, which is obviously the main priority. I would assume for everyone is to get this under control and then get back to something that we can resemble as normal and safely. But one thing that I've heard from a bunch of different coaches and even youth sports coaches is that they look at New York and how New York's kind of handled things, especially in our region. We're in the Mohawk Valley, being, a region that has been okay in a way. One death, one case is way too many, infinitely too many.
Right.
But comparatively, it's it's been more under control here than in other places of the country, especially at the moment. So their thoughts have been, if we do this regionally, that we can kind of have, maybe we stay within our counties or something. And Proctor, I imagine, would have that kind of scenario easier with having so many other towns around. You've got Proctor nearby, Whitesboro,
right.
Notre Dame within Utica itself, the Valley, even Herkimer, if you're going into the other counties, are right there.
Exactly. Right.
Everything's right here. Nate, again, not on the call at this moment, but one thing that he's spoken about is where he is down in Sydney, New York, in Otsego County, and in Delaware and Chenango counties, which I don't cover, but he does in the Section 4 area. They are probably definitely more spread out, and it might be difficult to coordinate travel, which in itself I know has been happening. How do you social distance and travel? But put that to the side for the moment. Just the scheduling aspect. I imagine it would be easier for a Proctor to come up with a season of nearby geographic schools than some of these Class C and D schools elsewhere.
Right. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it would be. I think one of the things the risk you run also because of human nature, if we decide we can do it because we have a little better handle on our virus and trying to control it within the community, do you have other people from other areas, other states where are looking at, oh, they're going to have sports, let's move. You might have some people kind of moving around in order to be able to play that sport because they find a district or an area that they're going to have their sports and they're going to try to keep a local. So what do you do in those cases? You start having people move into an area that may be coming from an area that has a high level of virus within their state or city, wherever it may be, and then trying to kind of search for pockets where they are going to have sports so they can get their kids playing that sport, especially those elite athletes that are looking to go on, that really want that year, not to lose that year. You may run into that, and which is, it's just part of human nature, we always want what we want in a sense, and when we figure out ways, many people, we're going to figure out ways to get that. If that means I have to pick up and move my child someplace where they are going to have athletics, that's something you have to take a look at. And what do you do with it? Can you say, oh, no, you're from this state and that, you don't have it under control, you can't come and play with us? How do you handle that?
Yeah, I honestly haven't spent much time considering that. I've considered the travel between regions and I've considered that, but haven't really put too much thought into the idea of that people from other states might actually literally pick up and move, because it seems like a drastic thing. But I guess in this kind of time, that almost is simplified to a financial decision for a family. If they were
right.
like, hey, we can afford for whether it's this year or whatever to literally move just to have an address
Right.
in New York instead, because it is
exactly.
then I mean, you pass that 14-day quarantine, I guess, that the state New York has imposed on some traveling. But yeah, that would be a very interesting thing that I haven't heard of happening yet, especially so close to the school year.
Right.
You never know what can happen mid-year if something happens.
Right. You just don't know, trying to keep track, human nature, you just don't have an idea of what, if it happens, I just hope it's someone who's 6'5" that comes into our area.
Someone, let's have them be really tall for the basketball. Okay?
Exactly.
That's fine. Well, I've appreciated getting your insight on this, because I really do think that fall sports have almost been somewhat in a good way on the sidelines,
right.
The least affected of anything because just of the timing of the year, right? We
right.
in the end of winter into spring and now in fall, and winter's just kind of been like, well, at the moment we're still not even close. So
right.
I've had that full year and it's amazing that it's almost been a full year. Like,
oh, I know.
I mean, it hasn't been, it's only been since March, but still the fact that we're talking about, January and February again, I'm like, that was right before this all started.
Right.
Is there anything else that you're kind of thinking about as a coach, as a basketball fan, as a sports fan, as involved in the school district that we didn't talk about that you think is just important for people to understand, or that is on your mind about all of this?
I think, I've been talking about the athlete and the emotional well-being for the player of sport, but what I left out is the coaches. Many of us, were athletes and played in high school and played college basketball. And we're all, we want to get back to our sport. I want to get back on the court, because that's a place where I feel comfortable and that's where my passion is. So, the thought of that possibly not happening, it's kind of depressing to think about, especially here in our winters. That's what gets me through the winters. I love coaching basketball and, that winter sport, because, gets me up, gets me going. I don't think that, I got to hibernate. I have things to do. So I love that aspect of it. So that's the other thing, the coaches, what they are going through, if their sport doesn't happen, and that's a significant, thing for, our emotional well-being also, because we enjoy that. We have a passion of teaching, our athletes, not only their game that we coach, the game of obviously basketball with me, but just that interaction that you have and the impact that you have on your student athletes. You miss that. You're teaching more than the sport. It's those life skills that you're hopefully conveying to these players. So that's hard. It won't be fun if something that doesn't happen. That will be a major blow to, I think, the coach's emotional well-being also.
Yeah, at least we have good weather right now. But
yeah, exactly.
Long winters in central New York and the Mohawk Valley and lower tier and everything. Basketball sports inside keep us there. And I always say it's ironic that sports bring us together, but right now that's exactly what we can't do in a time where we feel like we most want to be together. So
exactly.
But thank you so much for your time.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Girls basketball team, really appreciate it.
All right. Thank you for having me. Have a great rest of your day.
I'm really excited that Crystal Bass was able to join us. Again, the head coach of the girls varsity basketball team for Proctor High School. Really enjoyed her perspective of what it takes for a winter sport coach, and even the perspective from the coach's standpoint to give that insight on the fact that winter sport coaches aren't even necessarily hired yet. So we talk about trying to get school back in sports, but just the fact of how this has impacted everyone on all different levels, the interconnectedness of so many different things, and the processes, the many different things we don't really even think about all the time about hiring coaches and setting things up, what it will take. There is still a lot of unknown right now. But one thing we do know is that Nate Lull is, again, not in the studio here, but is at a basketball, or rather a baseball game right now. So Nate, what is exactly going on there at the baseball game rather? And what's been taking place today as that has all played out? And baseball is one of the sports that's been able to happen. So what's going on nearby you?
Hey, cross-section fans, Nate Lull here. I had a little different agenda today. Instead of being on the cross-section, I was covering live baseball, and I'm in Richfield Springs. The team that I was covering is the Catskill Mountain Cougars. They were taking on the Greenfield Yellow Jackets, who are a team out of the Albany area, and this was in the Eastern New York Travel Baseball League. So Richfield Springs was nice enough to give approval to have a doubleheader here today. So I was covering games at 12:30 and about 2:30. So a good day for Catskill Mountain as they won both of those games 5-2 and then 12-1. But so I got to go to baseball games on Saturday and Sunday this week. That was great, just to be back out on the field, getting a little sunburn, watching players get out there and do what they love. I mean, it was tremendous. I was also really impressed by both places that I went this weekend. I was in Oneonta on Saturday, and I'm here in Richfield Springs on Sunday. All the teams were following the precautions. Fans were spread out. Everybody was following the rules. It was so nice to see live baseball action, and also to see a lot of the rules being followed so that they can continue to do this throughout the rest of the summer. So my apologies for not being there on the cross section today, but I'm sure David did a great job, and great just to be out here and covering some baseball again. I really enjoyed myself, and hoping to do it for the rest of the summer and maybe into the fall as well. So signing off from Richfield Springs, this is Nate Lull.
Thank you for the live report, Nate. Probably our first live report here on the cross section, besides the fact that we're recording live here right now. But I do think that there's a lot of decision making that needs to happen. And the biggest message is still patience. And from everyone I've spoken with, Crystal Bass, the head coach that we just spoke with, the executive directors of the state association and sections, it's that waiting and patience and figuring things out one step at a time is really important. And when you look at the grand scheme of things, while we're constantly waiting for things to happen, at least from my perspective, we are in a very different place now with understanding what's going on with athletics in schools than we were when everything shut down and community died. So a lot of patience will be needed. I know as sports fans, especially myself, eager to get back into everything. Got some professional sports back. So as always, be sure to follow at Nate Lull to follow Nate's reporting, and also at David Z. Edelstein to follow my reporting on Twitter. Also David Z. Edelstein on Facebook, as we figure all this out together.